I'm glad you were able to schedule this, Barry, because I know that you're um, extremely busy, especially this time of year. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Who all do we have here? Hey, we got Tracy. Good morning. I'm driving right now, so I can't really see too many names. But hey, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Happy Friday. Today is the 22nd of December, and Christmas is just around the corner on this next Monday. And I wanted to have Barry jump on here because Barry Mathis, for any of you that don't know Barry, he's been a top agent, a top broker, top team leader. Now he has one of the top property management companies in Northern California. And a lot of agents are asking me about investment properties. Their clients want to buy investment properties and then manage them. And then also a lot of agents are asking me about just property management in general. So Barry, I'm going to turn it over to you. A, could you share a little bit about yourself? And then B, can you jump right in today? Go ahead, Barry.
All right, Tom. Well, Tom, thank you very much for including me. I definitely appreciate any time I can do anything that I have a chance to work with you in any way. If you guys don't know, my office is right next to Tom's. And so I hear Tom all the time working, and he is a great example of really being as mature an agent out there that knows as much as anybody, but he's so attached to his disciplines. And so that's what I respect the most about Tom since I've got to know him personally as I work next to him is, man, he gets on the phone and he makes his calls. He does the same things now, many of the same things now that he's always done that made him successful. So thank you very much for that. I'm Barry Mathis. I've been a real estate broker for a long time. I never really figured out what I wanted to do, so I've done a lot of different things. And real estate is amazing. If you're just getting started in real estate is amazing in that capacity. Probably more than any other business that I'm aware of. It just lets you go in so many different directions. And so I really enjoy that. Now, for me, I see Brett Swartz on here and a couple other big names out there, but Brett's always been an investor guy as well. And so for me, it's always been about investors. It's always been about me working with people that were buying real estate really as a legacy. They were buying real estate to either hand down to their kids or to replace other investment income. And that's always been something that's been important to me. I think it's a great equalizer. People talk about all these equity things going on in society right now. Well, anybody can do real estate. It's the one that crosses all boundaries. It doesn't matter what color you are, what gender you are, or how many genders you are in California. And so you can all do real estate, and I love it. So I'm going to jump right into, as far as my background, I've sold probably, I don't know, $200 million worth of real estate. I don't even know if that's the right number. I don't know where I got that number from. I've sold about 1,200 houses, and I think that equated out to about 200 million. So a long time in real estate, done a lot of sales, done a lot of team leader stuff. I'm also a broker. And all that means is I don't know what I don't know. There's so much out there that I don't know. That's what's caused me to go do those many things, is because I was learning the whole time. And if you're interested in learning about property management, I'm just going to jump through some things that I feel are important for you to do when you're going to manage properties. And I think we advertised this as 6 steps. I actually redid it and came up with 7. And so you're going to get the bonus step today. So the 7 steps for managing properties. Now, this is true, I think, whether you're managing for yourself, whether you're talking to a client that's going to manage properties. My background in property management, I grew a management portfolio of 300 properties and sold that company. Then now this year, I've grown a management portfolio of 190 properties. I think I'm at right now, 189 or 190. I'll have to check the numbers. And this portfolio is just grown really fast. And I think I've learned more. If you've ever done business, you'll understand this one. I learned more shutting down the first company than I ever did running the company. And so I think that is a one statement I can say that's really been true for me. So let's jump right into it. And feel free to stop if you have a question. I think somewhere on here there is a chat box, and you can probably put up questions on that. If you wish to do that, I'll be glad to pause and answer any questions. Sometimes I go kind of fast, and so when I go fast, then sometimes I gloss over details. So feel free to throw a question in the chat box if you wish. All right. So the very first thing is you've got to position your property well in the marketplace. And so this is true when you're selling houses. You know, we tell sellers this same thing, is that you have to position your home well in the marketplace. What does that mean? It means a lot of different things. It means taking care of any obvious condition issues. If people are going to come see the property, that you don't want them running screaming from the house. You know, I used to tell sellers, you know, what do we want? We want a baby to be able to crawl on the floor. If a new mom has a baby and that baby can crawl on the floor and the new mom doesn't get nervous, then you've got the right tone for your property, right? So that's a good test, I think. And so if they see hazards, if it's dirty, those kind of things are not going to go over well even on the rental side. Renters want the same thing that homeowners want. They want a nice, clean, safe property. And so and there's also some regulations to go with it that makes it even more fun, that you might not see on the selling side, but you definitely will see on the renting side. So proper positioning not only talks about condition, but it also talks about pricing. And this is true in the selling market, and it is doubly true, I believe, in the rental market. So there's a funny thing that happens in the selling market. So much data is out there on what the price should be, that in my opinion, you seldom find someone overpaying dramatically for a house. You know, you will get it occasionally if you do a bid auction kind of thing. Sometimes that'll run it up, but for the most part, no one pays 10% more for a house if they've got a similar house nearby. That is not true in the rental market. In the rental market, I can get fair market value and then upcharge 10%, and I will get applications for that property. I will get people that want to move into that property even at a higher price than what it should be. The problem with that is those people are not the people you want as tenants. Those people are the people who have to overpay. They've had a lifetime of being told no, and so they are willing to go to a higher, more expensive property, and they will cover up their faults as best they can. And you may or may not see through those faults, and the next thing you know, you've got someone in your property that you do not want in your property. And so try to avoid maximizing the rent. And I know that sounds very strange, but it's not about the same thing as it is with a house. This is not a one-time relationship. This is an ongoing relationship. You do not want crazy in the building. And so I know that sounds kind of funny, but my whole job, the majority of my job, is keeping crazy out of the building. And we'll talk some more about that later on. But that if you overprice the property, you're going to lose the people that you want to gain, because they're not going to go to overpriced property. The person that has good credit, good job, stable history, that person is the one you want. And they're not going to go after properties that are tweaked to the highest end of the market. Okay? Any questions on that? All right, we're going to jump right into it. And we're going to go to the second item. The second item is you've got to cast a wide net. So, you know, a typical property management website will have thousands of people coming to our site in a month. And we also syndicate out to many other websites that have lots and lots of people. Probably the most famous one and the biggest one is Zillow. Zillow has a very large rental component. A lot of owners will take their properties directly to Zillow. We pay for higher placement. We really value that Zillow relationship, but so we pay to place our properties up on a higher platform. So you really have to expose it. And so this is the same thing as with a house. They're very similar to selling a house. You need to cast a wide net. I want as many people seeing that property and as many applications as I can get. One of the reasons for that is I need lots of applications because I need to be able to choose the person that I want out of there. And being in California, we have some rules around, you know, putting applications out, accepting and holding and holding and holding and holding. They really want you to go with the people who come in first that are qualified. So if you have a qualified person that's applying, the state really wants you to go ahead and accept that person. And they see efforts to stack up applications over a long period of time. they see that as picking and choosing who you want to rent to, and that can get you into some definite hot water on the discrimination side. So the biggest thing you can do is get as many applications you can right up front. And the way to do that is to price it right, item number one, and then two, expose it across a wide variety of sources, right? So we'll use Facebook Marketplace, we'll use Craigslist, we'll use Zillow, we'll syndicate, and we'll use Hotpad. I mean, every site you can think of. Just like with real estate, we pick up a lot of syndications as well, and then we manually put it on these other sites. We manually enter our properties into about 4 different platforms in order to take advantage of all that syndication. And so it sounds like a lot of work. It's easier for me because I've got staff to do it, but you've got to get on a lot of platforms and get that thing exposed really well. Any questions there? Hey, we're moving pretty quick. I'm going to stop for coffee. So we're going to jump right back into it. Okay, go ahead.
Number one, yeah, so what requirements are there, state mandated or otherwise, that property is in a good, decent, rentable condition? Is there a checklist, or what are the requirements?
Yes, thank you, Tom. In that proper positioning, you want to make sure that the property is, I have a hard time saying this word, I apologize, habitability. So I don't know why it's so hard for me to say that word. It has to be habitable. And so there are some definite lists that go through and list those items. And those items, we usually get that list from HUD. But it's not that complicated. If you walk into a property and the windows are broken, well, guess what? You wouldn't put up with that in your house, and it's also not allowed by law. If you go into a property and the heater's not working, guess what? You need a heater. By the way, it's kind of interesting. You actually don't need an AC, but you do need a heater required by law. However, not having an AC would probably cost you a tenant. And so there's not a very complicated list. If you think it's broken and it needs to be fixed, then go ahead and fix it. And I'm going to get to that in just a little bit. But there is a list that we use from HUD that will give us a checklist. When our inspectors go out, they're checking that checklist. Believe it or not, one that gets overlooked a lot is you're supposed to have screens on your window. And so window screens are a must, and they can't be torn. Anything that would allow pests into the house is a problem. So we'll come back to that in number 5. All right. So deep screening for fakes. Okay, you've heard this term fakes. Right now, we believe that somewhere, depends on which property management company you ask. I'm hearing among NARPM, we have a NARPM association, which is just like NAR. I'm hearing among those members that somewhere between 25 and 40% of all the applications that we're getting have fake documentation. And that is a huge issue. In California, we're pretty limited on what we can get in order to verify these guys. And, you have to really make sure that you're doing a good job with the documents that they're giving you. And so that documentation is really important. What does that look like? Well, think about it. How hard would it be for you to fake a W-2 or to fake a pay stub, right? So in this day and age with PDF, I'm not even very good. And you send me a PDF, I can change whatever it is. I can unlock that PDF. I can make changes to it just like you could. And so none of this is very hard for the public to do. And I assure you, they are very smart at it. So we have some systems that are pretty unique. We can actually tie into their bank and check their bank deposits against what the statements are that they're sending us. We have some resources on the credit side that also will verify the income and go after those fakes that we're seeing. There's also a good sense of what should be there when you're looking at so many applications on a regular basis. But I encourage you to, if you're out there, really take the time to look at it. And if you've got a gut feeling that a document doesn't look right, it's probably because it's not right. And so if you ever want help reviewing one of your documents, if you're out there and you're renting yourself, if you want some help with that, feel free to set up an appointment with me. I'll be glad to look at it with you. Some of the tools we won't be able to use, but I'll be glad to look over your shoulder or give you some advice if you want on that. Okay. You really need to go after the references. You really have to go after what is it that they're telling you? Is it all adding up? Where are they coming from? Where's that income coming from? Is the income going to stay in place? Are there people in the property that they're not wanting to put on the lease? So in our case, we put everybody over 18 on the lease. That means they all have to do an application. We get information on all of them. It is very hard to do any collections after the fact if you don't have all their correct contact information and social security numbers and jobs and things like that. However, they'll give you stuff, and if you haven't ran it through a system, you don't really know if that's what you're getting or not. Part of these fakes that people see are people that are applying, and it's not even them. They're using totally different set of records and things like that. A lot of times you'll see people doing this, and they say they're out of the area and they want to rent the property, but they haven't been able to come see it. These are the same kind of scams you see in other areas. If it sounds too good to be true, if they're wanting to pay too much, if they're trying to be too friendly, this is a problem. You need to look into it further. Any questions in that area? So I'm going to tell you our number one claim to fame. Our number one claim to fame is that we have on the 300 properties I managed before and on the 187 or so this time, we have not placed anyone in a property that we had to evict. Meaning that if I placed them in the property, we didn't have to evict them. We have evicted a lot of people, but not that were placed in the properties by us. And so that's our claim to fame. I hope I can hold it throughout the whole year. I am sure that sometime in the next year, that claim will fall, but we're pretty happy with it right now. So, hey, Doug, I just wanted to check with you. Douglas Williams, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Good, good, man. How are you doing?
Real good, thanks. How about yourself?
Awesome, awesome. It's been a
Good.
little while since I saw you. Sorry for interrupting here, but I just noticed you there. So good to see you. We're going to jump right back at it. Is this sounding good to you, Doug?
Yes, it is.
All right. Anything you want to add?
One of the things I was going to mention to my properties is when I increase the rent after the annual, is when I increase it, it seems like that tenant always seems to be the one that starts complaining about different incidentals. You know,
Okay.
they got a little something there versus if I keep the rent the same, you don't hear from them. They just stay mute.
Yeah, yeah, that is a philosophy that many of my people that come to me start out with. And the problem with that is we just took over a portfolio from a guy that has I think he has 44 properties, and he has ran his portfolio that way for a long time. And you can imagine 44 properties is quite a bit of revenue. So when we took over the property after 1 year, we just ran an audit on him. His revenue is now up 11% on what we've collected, and it is down, his expenses are down 9%, right? And so what we did is we raised revenue, and then we raised across the board, and we perfected his collection habits. So by being persistent, we were able to get more money. And so now he's got a 20% swing in his profit just by us properly managing the property. And so those people, and he's got properties that are $700 under market, right? Because of that philosophy, because he didn't want to raise it a little bit each year, right? And so next thing you know, you wake up 10 years later and now you're $700 under the market. Oh, and oh, by the way, then we'll let California pass a law that says you can't bring it back up to market. You can only raise it, 9.2% in a year. And so now you're really screwed because he can't even catch back up, right? And so I would say fight that urge and just fix the property. So we'll talk about that more in number 5. All right, trust but verify. Okay, guys, you really got to, this goes right back to that trusting but verify. This is not just on deep screening. I'm not talking about the screening process now. I know it kind of sounds like I am, but what I'm talking about is inspecting the house, right? I'm talking about getting out to the house. Trust your tenants, but verify that they're taking care of the place before they burn the dang place down, right? If you think I'm joking, we actually just had someone last year burn a house down. So when he got his eviction notice for not paying after we finally stepped onto the scene, his response was to burn the house down. And so that is not the way we want to evict a tenant. And so when you go into that situation, when you let the tenants have complete control over your property without any checks and balances, then they wind up doing the same thing that your teenagers or your dogs will do if you let them have complete control of the house. They will tear it up, right? So they should expect that you're going to be coming through the property ever so often. They should expect that somebody's going to be raising the rent ever so often. When these things are done on a regular basis, they don't come as a surprise and they don't cause the pushback that they normally would cause. So you should be getting into your properties at least once or twice a year to inspect them, right? You should, for us, we like to we do our first inspection after we've rented the property, the second quarter so after we give them 3 months in the property, and then the second quarter, we're coming through the property, right? And we're going to come in there and do a health and safety check. We're going to check and make sure that smoke detectors and the CO2 detectors are working. But at the same time, we're going to make sure that they're not tearing the property up, that there's nothing going on that's going to cause a problem over the long term that we could have stopped in the short term, right? So that makes a big deal. And it sets them in the habit of we're going to be active managers in this property. And so by being an active manager of your property, you wind up knowing about problems before they come up. I was told a story when I first got in to real estate that somebody had been in a property and everything looked fine. They were doing drive-bys on the house. When the property manager went into it, I think it was Chris Aurora with Rent Pros, and he said that when you went to the back side of the house, they had been taking the shingles off the back side of the house. It was a cedar shake shingles and burning them in the fireplace for wood. And so the whole front of the house looked normal, and the back of the house was completely stripped of shingles because they had been burning them in the wood. We've also got horror stories of people who had marijuana. I've got one particular guy, he's a big lender here in town that a lot of people would know. And one of his rental properties, city of Sacramento fined him somewhere around $50,000 and then more fines on the top of that because he wouldn't pay it. He was fighting it in court. But his tenants were doing a marijuana grow, and he had gone out to the house and visited the front part of the house, but didn't go into the back bedrooms, and the marijuana grow was in the back bedrooms, and they came in and fined him, which is crazy because now they'd probably just tap him on the wrist. It's kind of weird, but you don't know what's going on in your properties if you don't get in there and inspect it. And if you only inspect it when you're starting to have problems with the tenants, then they feel like you're checking up on them. Then they feel like you're coming down on them. Then they feel like you're harassing them. But if you do it as a regular routine, it doesn't feel bad at all. They just think, oh, this is what he does for everybody. This is not personal. This is just what happens. Okay. So that's important. Trust but verify. All right. Number 5. Okay. I've referenced this one a few times now. Number 5. To me, this is very important. It's also a little contentious. You just hit the nail on the head. I'm going to stay with you, Doug. What kind of repairs would they ask for? Give me a couple of examples.
Oh, just a variety of things. For instance, the faucet in the kitchen doesn't seem to be flowing very
Yep.
well. Where
Yep.
you just have to take out the tip,
Yep.
and clean it out. Just miscellaneous, just small items that don't really amount to much, but you hear from them once you raise that rent just a little bit.
Yep, that is true. That is true. So yeah, you are making it kind of top of mind that, hey, we're paying for a service, we should get it, right? But at the same time, I would submit to you that you maintain to retain. You maintain to retain, meaning that you maintain that property much like you would a hotel to retain the tenant. And I want you to understand that these tenants are your clients. These tenants are your guests, right? And yes, they are paying you. And yes, you could be a slumlord if you want to, but you'll only succeed as a slumlord if you keep the rents lower than what the market's supposed to be. If you take care of the property the way it's supposed to be taken care of, the way that you would want it taken care of if you were living in it, then you will find that you'll retain those tenants much, much longer. They will stay. Instead of moving out every 2 to 3 years, you'll wind up with tenants that stay 7, 8, 9 years if you're taking good care of them, if you're seeing them as a client. And I want you to understand it's in your best interest to see them as a client. Why? Because the number one expense that you will face, higher than taxes, higher than your management fee, is going to be turnover. Turnover in a rental property is not what you want. So you do not want vacant properties. That's terrible because all kinds of bad things can come from vacant properties. So just the time period that it sits vacant in between the two rent ups, that's the most dangerous time of the property, when it sits vacant. But just the transaction itself, the loss that happens between the time they put in their notice, all the repairs you have to do when they move out, all the making it nice again in order for it to look pretty for the next person to get market value, and then the vacancy in between. All of that is the most expensive time that you're going to run into as a property manager. So if you can just take the time to do it takes 15 minutes to change that little filter on the end of the water faucet. It takes just a few dollars to do it. Most of the time, our clients do not spend a ton of money. Our average repair bill is about $200, right? And so most of the time, this is not big stuff. Where you're seeing big stuff is things that were generally left too long anyway. They're not usually actually repairs, they're actually capital improvements, which even the text code says is a completely different thing. And so if you'll just maintain that property, when you maintain the property, you're maintaining the relationship. And when you're maintaining the relationship with the tenant, so the tenant doesn't feel like you're the enemy, the tenant feels like you're on their side, then you maintain that relationship over the long term and they'll stay there. Does that make sense, guys? So let's avoid that biggest expense. I'm not saying do everything they ask you. I'm not saying you're at their mercy, but I am saying it goes a long ways. I'll give you an example. A lot of our properties have dryers in them. I know, dryers and wash machines, right? And every one of our leases say that those are done without a warranty and that they're just not going to be repaired if they break. You know what though? If it's a nice looking machine and they move in there with that machine and it breaks down, you probably should go ahead and do the repair, just because of the good feeling it gives that tenant to know that you're taking care of them. It's probably going to be a couple of $100 repair. And yes, you're 100% legal to say no. And we do have owners that sometimes say no, but I think on many occasions, you probably should go ahead and take care of a small item like that because of the relationship it gives you with that tenant. And then they'll let you go. And then the other thing is on those rent increases, if they're a great tenant, you might not want to go all the way, depending on where you're sitting in the market. So make sure that your lease increases are based on the market. You want to do a little bit of an increase every year, I believe, but if in a market is slowing down, you don't want to do a 10%. Let's go back to 5%. And right now, that's kind of where we are, by the way, guys. If you're way under the market, I'm going to take you up as much as I can, right? I'm going to try to balance it just enough to get you not to move out. But if you're way under, I might be okay with you moving out, right? So some properties are under the Tenant Protection Act and some properties aren't. So depending on which one, how that falls is how I'm going to treat that. And that's a whole nother class. So we're not going to get into that class. However, so there's limits on what I can do to raise it. But even when I don't have a limit, I'm trying to keep them in the property for the most part, unless they're dramatically underneath. And then I'm going to push that up and try to push them out if the owner wants to do that. So right now we're doing a 5% increase, should be pretty common with most everybody. They shouldn't see a big problem with that. If they're already pushing the top of the market, you might lower that down just to something nominal like $50, but I would always give them something so that they get used to it. But if you start going over 10%, you're very likely to get someone to move out. And so you have to be prepared for that. In some cases, I want that. In other cases, I do not. In most cases, I do not. Okay. Maintain to retain is number 5. Number 6, perfect your paperwork. I don't know how many times I'll have people come to me. Do you have a lease? Oh, we had a lease. We never really did anything with it. I don't even know where it is anymore. That lease is so let me back up one. Don't ever let anybody into one of your properties for any reason without some kind of lease, period. And especially family. It's not only if you have certain kinds of family. Every type of family member does not come into one of your properties unless they have a lease. No one should be in your properties. The majority of the evictions that we start into that didn't have a lease is almost always a family member. And then we're having to evict them later without a lease. it is much easier for me to do the eviction process, and it will go about 2 months shorter to do the eviction process if you have a lease in place. Okay. So just make sure you get that lease and an application no matter what you're doing. Okay. Now, coming back to that paperwork, your lease needs to be reviewed ever so often to keep up with society, to keep up with the laws and the changes that happen. There are many do-it-yourself people out there who are fine doing real estate, and they back themselves into a corner. Did you know that if your lease doesn't let you have your lease doesn't spell out that you're exempt from the TPA, the Tenant Protection Act, AB 1482, you actually void your exemption. And you take a property that was not under Tenant Protection Act and move it into being under Tenant Protection Act, all because you didn't put it in your lease. That is a very bad thing. Okay. That is not that is negligence on your part as a landlord. And if you're advising clients, it's negligence on your part as a client. If you're a property manager, you were negligent in your duties if those leases didn't pertain to that. Okay. So, perfect your paperwork, make sure the paperwork's done right. When we go to move people out later on, if we get into adversarial position with them, our strength comes from the paperwork. You can do a whole lot of things, even in the state of California, as long as your rental agreement calls for it. You can have people agree to things that you might not even think are legal, but if your rental agreement calls for it, it actually, in many cases, is. Now, you have to be, there are some limits to that. So my advice is to either use the CAR form, which only has about 70% of my endorsement. So either use the CAR rental form, or preferably go with the property management company that has a form that's been approved by attorneys, or get your form approved by attorney. An attorney will read that form, and they'll read your lease and tell you whether it's good or bad and what you should have in there. And we'll charge you just a nominal charge. We get ours looked at quite often by attorneys, and I would say at least once or twice a year, I'm going in and making changes. We're up to 35 pages for our lease. And so if you think that your 8-page lease covers everything that my 35-page lease does, I'm telling you, your font's not that small. So if your font was smaller, maybe you could do it. But by the way, there's even requirements in the California law for what size the font has to be. So your small font's not going to work either. Okay, so 35 pages, they're there for a reason. When I was in the military, I used to really be surprised at some of the dumb rules they had. They had rules that just didn't, I'm like, where did that come from? And then later on, I figured out that every dumb rule that I saw that didn't seem to make a lot of sense, somebody probably died in order for that rule to be created, right? And so that tag on the mattress is there because somebody lit a mattress on fire, right? So you might think, who would smoke in bed? But people do. So this is true with the 35-page lease. Every clause that's in it is because somebody went to court and lost. And so then they came out with a lease that covered that. They put a clause in there that covered that item. And so make sure that you've got good paperwork. This also is true for almost everything you negotiate with your tenants. So let's say that you have something like you negotiated a payment plan to catch up on back rent, then put it on paper. And you negotiated, that they're going to cut the grass in return for something. So put that on paper. And guys, I just realized the clock here. And so I apologize. Thank you for your patience. I know I've gone long. I'm going to drop on the last one, which is number 7, is the nuclear option. The nuclear option of property management, and you guessed it, it's an eviction. You really have a few things you can do, quite a few things you can do going up to that nuclear option. And man, you should exercise every choice you have before you go to an eviction. And don't let them hold you hostage. Don't make this thing drag out forever, because then it's probably not going to get solved. Most of the time, once you start having a problem, they either need to leave or you're going to have to evict them. And so if they don't leave quickly, if you don't come to terms in the first, little bit that you're having a problem with them, then you need to get them out of there and go ahead and start the eviction. But remember, eviction is the nuclear option. It's going to take you 3 months to evict them. If they go all the way through the court system, if they're good at it, it can take longer than that. But a typical eviction right now is going to take 3 months, maybe even 4. Now, it is pretty consistent. We are back on track. The courts aren't as backed up as they were. So you should be free of them in 3 to 4 months. And I mean from start to moved out. That process is a whole lesson on itself, how to do an eviction. I'll be glad to talk with anybody if you need that help. But try to avoid that option if you can. Try to avoid that option. I'll give you one little way to avoid that option is people don't like answering your phone when they owe you money. They don't like responding to your text when they owe you money. And so even if you think they're just the most jaded person in the world, they still have that. They still don't want to respond. They just don't want to get into that kind of situation. So one of the things you can do before you go to the eviction is serve them a notice to come in and inspect the house. And in many cases, that's going to put them face to face with you. They're either not going to let you in, or you're going to come in and they're going to meet you there. Most of the time, they're going to get face to face with you when you serve that notice. And at that point, you're given one last chance in order to work it out before you go nuclear. And so I find that a face-to-face talk oftentimes will result in that. Does it work out? No. 50% of the time, you're still going to have to evict them. But that other 50% of the time just saved you a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of heartache. So if you can get face-to-face with them and find out what their challenge is, what's stopping them from getting out of your property, that's usually going to be something that lets you lead to an alternate that will let you at least have some options other than nuclear. So they have to make the choice. They have to want it as bad as you do. You can't want to help somebody more than they want to help themselves. And so if you can't do that, then, you have to move on to the eviction. Well, guys, my direct line is 916-225-7777. You guys can contact me anytime. My company name is Expert Property Management. That's Expert Prop, PROP, MGMT.com. And so you guys can go there. You can check us out. You can contact me anytime. Cell phone or text is best for me. We're going to jump off here. I'm going to turn it back over to Dave. It looks like Dave is having a better day than I am. Tom's having a better day than I am.
Hey, well, thank you so much, Barry. I appreciate it. Well, thanks everyone for jumping in. Man, you dropped some great value, some great information. Thank you so much. Well, hey, y'all. Hey, Merry Christmas. We're having no meetings next week. We're going to hit it hard come first week of January. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. And we'll see y'all soon. Thanks, Barry. See you guys. Have a good day.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Barry.
You're welcome.
Happy
Have a
holidays.
great day. Thanks, Doug.